So I'm down to like 2 cream Dr. Peppers. Hey, it's Romania Black. I'm down to like 2 of these. My brother has drank all the rest of them. And then after that, we're going to round out the season with Chaos Berry. So taking note of that. We are on episode 20 of Steins Gate, which is wild. We only have like 5 episodes left, 5 or 6, which is, it definitely feels with Moeka in the last episode like we are starting to get down to the nitty gritty and get into the final arc of this. And I'm very nervous, very hyper aware that things are going to go down. And I'm very worried because I thought maybe around the time that we were starting to get Ferris involved, that this series, I'm like, are we really going to go back to the beginning with all this? It feels like we're getting back to the beginning, but this whole mystery about freaking FB has been plaguing me this whole series, and now maybe we're going to figure out who the hell that is. So we shall see. But I have a lot of comments to get through and talk with you all about, so this is probably going to take a little bit longer than normal, but we need to dive into it. And some of this is very relevant, so we need to talk about that. These comments are mainly concerning episodes 18 and 19. Mainly episode 18 from YouTube and 19 from Patreon, and then next week we'll have 19 and 20 and so on and so forth. But V. Valdinia says for episode 18, I like when we have Watsonian and Doyleist approaches. It's been a while since a rhetoric class, so it's fun to dive back into those. The Watsonian answer to what is Ruka is, quote, a person who's grown up without exposure to anything queer and doesn't know how to define themselves, but who would fall somewhere on the trans spectrum if they did enough soul searching. My personal opinion is that she would be a trans woman. She seems to be perfectly happy as a woman, but we don't know for sure. In parentheses, they said she does always say she feels more comfortable if her looks match her gender, but that could be partly because of societal pressure. The Doyleist answer to what is Ruka is that the writers relied more on tropes than actual trans experiences, though of course we cannot be sure. There might have been queer people among the writers. We don't know. The only decision that they said they don't like with Ruka is that when she knows that she's going back to be a boy, she focuses so much on Okarin and losing the chance to be with him instead of how she feels about herself. Other than that, I think the series is fairly respectful of her and her experiences, given that she isn't the focus and has had a lot less screen time than most of the main cast, and would therefore be a little odd to go into a ton of detail with her experiences with gender. Yeah, that whole note about her focusing on Okarin and losing the chance to be with him, that is something that has popped up with, not with Moeka, good, thank goodness, but it has popped up with Ferris a little bit, and it has popped up with Mayuri, and it has popped up with Ruka, and I feel like it's gonna pop up with Kurisu if things go the way I think they're gonna go. With Moeka, I'm not so sure unless Moeka suddenly develops a crush on Okarin because he freed her from her codependence on FB, which could very well happen. But my one thing that makes me kind of like tilt my glasses just a little bit at the show is like, so all these female characters, huh? They just all happen to like thank their savior Okarin, huh? And focus more on how what's happening is going to relate their, experience with him than about themselves, huh? I mean, Ferris at least was like thinking about her dad, but she chose to give up her dad because this stranger that she's known from a cafe was like, but it'll save my friend. I was like, that is the one thing that makes me kind of side-eye the show a little bit, but we're not done with the show, so we can't be side-eyeing too much right now. But it is like the whole harem aspect of it that I'm like, okay. But I do agree that it's probably better that they didn't get too far into Ruka, especially with her as a character as shown as often as she is, because, I think sometimes it's better to know if you don't have someone on the writing cast that is with experience with either being trans or having close relationships with someone who is, it's like, is that the best decision to write a character like that? That's an ongoing discussion. And we talked a little bit about it in episode 18. But Poryganj added, saying, woof, what a conflicting episode. On one hand, I think there's maturity in being able to reinterpret or filter outdated media through the lens of one's modern sensibilities. Oh, I love it. When people are like, oh, that BL is problematic, I'm like, I want to look at it because I feel like it's important. You can derive relevant things out of things that are problematic and outdated. So yes, let's look at it. But even when I watched this way back when, I remember feeling bothered by how Ruka's gender was handled. I'm glad that you said that, because I was trying to think of that in the episode. I'm like, if I had watched this, I would have been in college. I would have been probably a senior in college when this show came out. I'm like, would I have reacted the same way? I don't know. I would like to think that I would have been similar to my own mindset, but that's really hard to determine. I don't know. So rewatching it all these years later, I can appreciate the effort that was put in, but I ultimately feel like the series, along with so many others, in parentheses, would have benefited from a more diverse writing team. This series especially would have benefited greatly with input from women, queer people, foreigners, not only in terms of sensitivity, but also in strengthening the authenticity of characters, relations, and world building. Nonetheless, I will say that I'm enjoying this watch through much more than my first, and the series does have a lot more going for it than I remembered. This episode really tugged at my heartstrings. Thank you for the reactions and discussions. Oh, thank you! I really like this series. It is not without a few flaws, but they are few and far between for me. I really like them. Most of the things are kind of like gender aspects or things with femininity that I'm kind of like, as a female content creator and viewer, I'm always like, do better to shows, but I feel for the most part, especially with it coming out as early as it did compared to other stuff I watch on my channel, I think it's pretty comparable. I like Steins Gate a lot, and so I'm curious to see what this whole stuff with Moeka is going to turn out to be, though. I'm really curious about the whole Moeka aspect. Amber Sandra, who also, thank you, Amber Sandra, for providing us with the files for these videos. Thank you so much. All of my love. Super appreciate it. Being able to watch the dub for this has been so exciting, and it's only been because of Amber Sandra that I've been able to do this, and we're going to talk about the dub here in a second. But they said, Romania talking about the episode's title reminded me that I never did write a comment about episode 17's title. I think it might be my favorite because I'm a sucker for a great pun. Made in complex. Feyris grew up in all the world lines in a skyscraper building towering over Akihabara. She was grew up in a complex or high rise, but also maid sounds like maiden and could be a reference to Feyris's turmoil that episode. She's a maiden, a damsel, who has to make a complex choice, Mayuri or her dad. This shit has layers! To be fair, I'm sure the others might have deeper meanings, but that one just got me the easiest. Yeah, also made as in maid cafe, just spelled differently. I love it. I think it's amazing. This shit has layers indeed. Love that. So as Anime did clear up saying in their comment, they were like, the last D-mail where everyone knew who Moeka was actually was after Feyris's D-mail, but she wasn't a lab member. Mayuri just knew, and the others knew who she was. So, okay, after Feyris's D-mail, they knew who she was, but they couldn't remember her being a lab member before. But before Moeka's D-mail, she was a lab member. And that's when Moeka discovered that they had the IBM 5100, which would connect to them telling FB possibly, and FB telling them, here, have them send this D-mail, and then just, who is FB? What the fudge is FB? I'm so curious. Which brings me to the dub. Okay, look. The dub is so good, and honestly, this is one of the few episodes where I feel like there is a drastic difference in how you view Okarin's character, depending on if you watch the dub or the sub. I'm just saying. I found J. Michael Tatum infinitely more sympathetic in this episode than Miyano Mamoru. Miyano Mamoru, their voice acting for Okarin is this unhinged. Like, I feel like when Miyano Mamoru does the unhinged Okarin, he makes him colder. He makes him more despondent. He makes him more cut off and distant. J. Michael Tatum's Okarin Crash Out version is way warmer, but just more like desperate. More desperate and more just pronounced in his despair, right? Because this opening line where he's like waiting for Mayuri to die and you're like, oh, he snapped. The moment J. Michael Tatum was like, the waiting, God, it's killing me. And I'm like, we've been talking about this in the comments and the discussion for how many episodes about Okarin having this crash out and him going through the time leaps over and over again. I feel like this is the first episode where Okarin's character gets to monologue about it, and it's really effective. He's like, our D-mails have come at a cost. Yep, playing with things you shouldn't play with. Yes, indeed. I really like in the dub how close Okarin and Kurisu, how they've become through their conversations. The dub really does a good job of showing how connected they are, and they've really kind of become this really intimate pairing, which is really cool. Now, about some exposition things. At the arc rewrite in the dub said that Moeka lasted a day or two and then flaked out. So I feel like in the world line where she gets the guys to like join her to go, I feel like in that world line she had to have worked there more than just a few days, because she literally organized like a group to go murder someone and steal from people. So you would think in that world line she lasted more than a couple days, or she hadn't just started working there. But in this world line she only worked a few days and then left. In the scene where Okarin is outside of Moeka's apartment and he's just holding his head in his hands, the dub really makes it apparent that he's realizing this endless time loop that he's stuck in. And then he's like, I should have been with her. When Moeka dies, yes, you should have. You should have also hugged her, Okarin. What are we doing? But I get it, right? FB has told Moeka what to do. And then the part that made me really believe that J. Michael Tatum's version of Okarin is much more sympathetic than Miyano Mamoru's is in the part where he's struggling and fighting Moeka to get the phone, and when he decides to punch her. Miyano Mamoru's version was just, I'm pissed and I'm gonna get revenge on you for killing my friend, and it's like angry and cold. Whereas in J. Michael Tatum's interpretation of that line, he's like, you started this when you killed my friend. And it just comes across a little bit more sympathetic to me than Miyano Mamoru's. They're both crashing out and they're both like just done, but there's a different tone in how each of them do it. And then it is made more clear in the dub that Okarin kisses Moeka to keep her from screaming for the landlady. The dub makes that a little more apparent, but still putting them in that situation, but still. I'm just like, the consensual queen that I am is like, even though you know that it was to keep her from screaming for the landlady, I'm still like, but anyway. Moeka apparently sent a different D-mail back to herself, instead of doing what Kurisu and Okarin told her, maybe because she was tricking them. FB wanted them to trick them to procure the 5100, the IBN 5100. We can only assume. Now, when she tells him at the end where the 5100 is, it's like, okay, he's going to go get that, but he still has to find out who FB is. Is he going to have to undo this world line anyway to find FB? And also, will that change the location of the IBM 5100? It's like, how are we going to do that? I will say, though, like I have been saying, there is a warmth to J. Michael Tatum in this episode, even when he's chiding Moeka at the beginning where he's like, rescued you. They condemned you. And maybe it's the language barrier. It just sounds less cold. However, that lead up to the they don't care talking about FB is crazy. That's where it really goes off the rails, because he's trying to, it felt more in the dub like he's trying to reach Moeka and be like, hey, FB used you and why are you doing this? In the sub, it sounds more like Okarin's just crashing out and letting all this emotion that's built up within him for the last how many episodes, 8 or 9, finally just come out, and he's just yelling at Moeka and getting that all out of his system. The dub makes it sound like he's actually caring a little bit for Moeka's well-being and trying to convince her out of it. So there are two tonal differences with how his lines are interpreted, and I find that really fascinating. But yeah, and then this scene in the dub, I actually like this better in the dub. This scene where where Moeka's talking about FB, she's like, she made me feel like I belonged. And then you get the flashbacks of Mayuri and all of them taking her in as a lab member. And I loved this dub line where Okarin goes, what, that's all? You're a fool. So did we. And that so did we, I was like, oh. Because he's like, basically, that adds a whole nother context to that scene. Because Okarin's saying, you're an idiot. FB saying that they gave you a place you belonged. So did we. We gave you a lab. You had friends. Why did you need to go back to FB and cause all of this? Wild times. And maybe, I'm wondering if we're going to touch on it in this episode, because I thought about it when I was rewatching the dub for episode 19. And I hope episode 20 kind of touches on it. But back in the lab, whenever she was lab member number 5 or whatever, number 4, the thing was he was using her. He was using her to send the D-mail to get the whole time machine stuff. And back then, Okarin didn't really take her seriously. She thought she was kind of a weirdo and was really antisocial. And he's like, I don't know this girl, but yeah, sure, we'll use you to send a D-mail. You can be part of our experiment. And now I wonder if he's going to realize I shouldn't have done that because she was being used by someone else. And me using you just feeds into that mentality that that's all you're good for is being used. So whenever I'm done using you and FB wants to keep using you, you're going to go with FB because you're just conditioned to believe that's all people care about you for. Maybe he'll realize that. Maybe that will get addressed in this episode. We shall see. And then whenever Okarin, in the dub, he says, luckily I don't leave things to fate anymore. I'll keep fighting until my Yuri is safe. In the sub, Miyano Mamoru's like, I'm against the world. And it's like, it sounds a lot more villainy. Here, Miyano Mamoru makes it sound more like a villain statement, and Okarin with J. Michael Tatum makes it sound more like, I've not given up hope yet. I'm still fighting, but I'm not quite like unhinged. You know, not quite as unhinged, but yeah. So sorry this was such a long intro, but the dub was really good this week and I wanted to talk about it. And y'all had some amazing comments and I wanted to talk about that too. So hopefully y'all keep those comments coming in because I'm really enjoying reading what you have to say. And I have a feeling that these next couple episodes are going to be pretty interesting to talk about. But with that being said, we need to get started with this episode, so let's not waste any more time. We are going to start episode 20 of Steins Gate. Ooh! And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And I'll see you all on the other side. Well, fun times ahoy, because we have new markers for Whiteboard Coon, and they are magnetic. I'm unstoppable now. I feel like I needed to channel some of the mad scientist vibes from Okarin this episode because remember when this was just a fun show? Remember when this was a fun show about time travel? Remember those days? I don't. Honestly, that looks so weird to me, but we'll just have to get used to it. It feels so bizarre that now we've gone from being like, we're just a bunch of quirky college kids playing with time to, hey, this person I've developed a relationship with over the course of this series may have to die for real. What are we going to do about that? So, here's the thing. Let's talk about that for a hot second before we dive into this, because there were a couple things that were confirmed in this episode that I had suspicions of. There are a lot of things that I'm still like, still waiting to hear about and know from, but a brand new marker, we shall see. I'm glad it says dry erase because I'm like, is this permanent? But so here's the thing. In the OG, ooh, you can read that. We might have to get, when we get the new camera, it might have to zoom in on that. But yeah, so in the OG timeline, we had Okarin. Maybe that all shows up better. Oh, there we go. We had Okarin where he found Kurisu's body, right? But before then, he ran into her in the hall and she kind of tugged him from the classroom and said that she had just saw him. She just saw him and he said to look out. Here's the thing. In the first episode, which we're all going back to, I mean, the episode was called The Beginning and the End, so you knew it was going to come full circle. We're going to go back to that episode. You know it's coming full circle, right? I guess the lottery email doesn't mean anything. I guess the lottery D-mail that was like one of the first emails, I guess we're not going to do that now. I guess maybe next episode they'll undo that one because I feel like that's part of the chain is that D-mail. But this whole thing in episode 1, when she said she met him and he said that he had told her to look out and she's like, why would I look out and all this? Is this like it feels like a convergence where Okarin from, but that can't happen, can it? Unless, like, an Okarin from a future world line went back to try to tell her to be careful so she doesn't get stabbed. But then the Okarin from the OG world line is like, what? I don't know you. And then so if the Okarin, if this was OG Okarin, but the Okarin that told her this was like future Okarin from maybe Okarin from the beta timeline. I know that we have a movie or an OVA or something like this, and I know that we have Steins Gate 0. I don't know what that is. I don't want to know. But what if Steins Gate 0, and this is just Romania theorizing ahead of time, and it's going to age like soured milk poorly. But what if this future Okarin that's telling her not to get stabbed is from Steins Gate 0? Where Okarin decides to go back and he realizes that he made a mistake and he's like, actually, let's keep her from getting stabbed because we're going to need to use that time machine to save Mayuri. So he tries to go back and like fix that. And he's like, no, don't do it. I don't know. I'm just shooting in the dark here. But then the question is, end of series Okarin going to try to prevent her from being stabbed? Or is he going to try to prevent Okarin from running into her? Because essentially him seeing her get stabbed is what started the entire D-mail chain. It started the first one. So if you undo that D-mail, then you let that reality stick where she ends up getting stabbed. That's what it amounts to. And the thing that's so cruel about this series is that, and you notice it from the get-go. We've been talking about it the last several weeks, have we not? About Okarin getting closer and closer to her. It's very Doctor Who that they get closer and closer, but it's literally a Doctor Who entire arc, basically. And I don't want to spoil it, but it is, of these two characters getting closer and closer to being the most intimate that they ever will be. But that's the moment that she has to die. And it's like, and it's one of those things where, like, is it going to be, the question is going to be, and I want a different color for this because I feel like, actually we're going to use the same color, but we're going to keep this other color up here. The fact that I have magnets on these now is, I could keep them up there like that. This is a game changer, y'all. Romania has a game changer. Like, my Christmas to myself this was actually Whiteboard Coon's Christmas. This was not my Christmas. This is Whiteboard Coon's Christmas, our new Marker Sans. Marker San has got like a new groove, right? Now, Whiteboard Coon is polyamorous. And is in relationships with multiple Marker Coons. So, Official Cloud Bakery is going to have a fun time with this. Anyway. So, what is interesting is we have kind of this choice being set up where it's presenting this set of options, right? If the story could go three ways. This is based on a visual novel, and it feels kind of like a choose your own adventure, right? The choice, there's like choice A, there is choice B, and then there is choice C. There are three choices, and these three choices could go one of three directions depending upon how cruel the show wants to be to us, right? Choice A is that we get to this beta line, this beta world line, we cross the 1% threshold, and we save Mayuri, but it is at the stake of Kurisu dying. And then in this world line, there is no dystopia because Kurisu is dead. She can't make the time machine. CERN, she doesn't help make it with CERN, so there is no dystopian future. And the day is saved. But Okarin, who will have all his memories, mind you, have all his memories of her, will have to live with the fact that, yes, he saved Mayuri, but he also caused the death of the woman that he loved. And the cost of the world not being in a dystopian future was losing her, the mother of all time machines. Just cruel shit like that. And then choice B to me is like the cruelest. What if he undoes everything? What if he undoes everything and even goes to like the alternate world line? Let's say that it works. Let's say he crosses the threshold and Kurisu dies. What if it didn't matter? What if Mayuri died anyway? I mean, she's going to eventually. Everyone is. But what if she died eventually? And the show was just that cruel. They're like, yeah, you did all this work. Cool, good job. She was going to die anyway. And it's like, now he's left with nobody. That would be the ultimate bad ending. At least in this ending, he has Mayuri, his best friend. But in that ending, that'd be terrible. I would not wish that upon anybody. That's like the cruelest of cruel timelines. This one's bad enough. Because he's been developing, Mayuri's made the comment the whole time that the closer that Okarin gets with Kurisu, the more they get into their time travel shenanigans, the further away he gets from Mayuri. Now, there's been two different things. There's been the void that he was in, like looking at the event horizon back in like episode, 5 or 6, where it was Kurisu's voice talking to him about the event horizon and about changing time and all of that. There was that. But then there was also the flashback where he was, 100 million years ago with Mayuri and they went back that far. I mean, what do we do? What are we going to get out of that? I'm very curious. Choice C is like the happy ending. Choice C is the happy ending where somehow Okarin has his cake and eats it too. Somehow he figures out a way to save Mayuri and doesn't have to have Kurisu die in the process. That to me is not likely. I feel like what's going to happen is it's going to suck if we get this, though, because he's developed this relationship with Kurisu, and she's literally been the reason. It's like, she's kind of, the crazy thing is, she is the hourglass. That's why she's the hourglass in the ED, right? She's literally the hourglass in the ED. It all makes sense because she's the cause of the time. She's the cause of the time machine getting created in the first place. She's the cause of all this starting. It's really down to her. So if she's not there, then it goes back to how it was. But something this show has kind of brought up with her is that she has family. She has a mom. She has a dad. She has family too, just like Mayuri doesn't really have family left, except, Okarin's her close family, but Feyris had a dad. Ruka has their own identity and their family. So these characters that are getting affected by the decisions that they're making, they all have families. They all have lives. They all have identities. So it's so twisted and messed up that this could kill Kurisu. Why did she have to die? And Okarin saying he's going to fight fate and change all that. I'm like, can you have your cake and eat it too? Can you save everyone? I don't think you can. I think you have to make a choice. And it's like, what choice are you going to make? Are you going to choose Mayuri or are you going to choose Kurisu? And I don't know how the story can let him have both. When it very much seems like it wants him to choose. I don't know. I'm going to be curious to see what ending we get with this, how it ties to the OVA or the movie that we watch after this and how it's going to tie into Zero. I don't want to know those questions. Those are spoilers. Romania doesn't like spoilers, so we're going to hold off on those until we get later on. But yeah, what a crazy time. So yeah, one thing I'm glad about this episode was I felt conflicted about a few things with this episode. I felt conflicted about a few things. We're going to talk about it, and I'm curious to know your thoughts down below without spoilers, because obviously it's going to be hard to talk about this without spoiling the next several episodes, but we can all do our best, right? The one thing I'm glad about is I'm glad that Moeka did not have a romance subplot with Okarin. You could tell that Kurisu was getting a little jealous there when they met up. She's like, are you safe with her? But she also knows Okarin knows that she killed Mayuri. And she's like, So I'm glad that there wasn't like a forced romance subplot with Moeka. I'm glad that wasn't the case. I'm also kind of glad that Braun wasn't trying to seduce Moeka, that it really was just him using people in the moment, and he did that to lots of people. I'm glad that was established, because I feel like Moeka, Feyris, what is the best way to put this? Feyris in the hotel room kind of, I don't want to say put herself out there for Okarin, but she kind of did. She kind of was okay with it, and she grabbed Okarin and clutched onto him and everything. So that was consensual on her part. She wanted that. And Ruka, it was the same way. But Moeka has had no interest in Okarin whatsoever. And I know the scene in the last episode wasn't meant necessarily to be titillating or whatever. But I'm glad that it wasn't. I'm glad that Moeka suddenly wasn't clingy with Okarin like she was with FB. I'm glad that wasn't the case because I was afraid of that this episode. Going in, I was really afraid that she was going to like start clinging onto Okarin, being like, well, you care about me and you give me a place of belonging. And Okarin's like, I'm just trying to keep my friend from dying. Like, I'm glad that wasn't a plot point. So I am glad about that. That was good to get at least. But yeah, so she tells about the coin locker. We get past this OP and they do a stakeout at the coin locker. I do love Kurisu's stop, do not pass go with the crowbar. And I like that she's like, you need to think for a hot second. All right, you need to think about what we're doing. She's like, you need to remember everything that has happened so far. Even after all the D-mails that you've done, the IBN still eluded you. She's like, instead of breaking in to the coin locker and getting the IBN, why don't you stake out and see if it goes somewhere that you can track? So basically the IBN in this world line, Moeka gets a hold of the IBN 5100, puts it in the coin locker, and then it ends up going and traveling to FB, who ships it to CERN, is basically what ends up happening. Now, here's where things get a little bit wonky and weird, right? Because we have, this is the world line where this happens, and then that takes us to the current world line, what they change. They end up changing the text from FB, where the current world line is that Okarin has the IBN 5100 and is using Daru to hack into CERN. Now, maybe in this happy ending world line, there's a way that they're able to delete the D-mail. They're able to delete the D-mail from the system. And if that is the case, without having to change the past, maybe they can have the happy ending. Maybe if they delete the D-mail from CERN at the time, then it won't go back and they won't have to worry about it. Maybe that'll be the case. Maybe they can just do that and then happy ever after, he saves everybody and kumbaya, they can kiss and make out and whatever. But I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But that's the goal, is that we do that. Okay? That's the goal in the current world line. Now, originally, and I'm going to get over here, hopefully you all can hear me from back here. Originally, what we had going on in the OG world line was that we had the IBN 5100 from the shrine, which got there from Ferris, we believe, and then that went to Okarin, and then they were going to use it, but hadn't yet. There was that whole debacle about the translation and the visual novel error and whatever, but that was the case, right? And then throughout the world lines, it was the IBN 5100 was lost, right? The interesting thing about the IBN 5100 is that it was trying to be located by FB to give to CERN. It was trying to be located by them, but it was also trying to be located by Amane to take to Okarin. And one is to save the future, and one is going to cause the future. And that's kind of thing. We're going to talk about Amane and FB, old Mr. Braun, here in a little bit. We're going to talk about them. But it's interesting because back in the OG timeline, Moeka was trying to get the IBM 5100. From the very beginning in the OG timeline, Moeka's been after that computer. So Braun, working in this damn TV store, who's been antagonistic playfully with Okarin, has really been his main enemy since day one. Since day one has that been the case. So that's just freaking crazy. That's been him all along. We've joked about him not liking Okarin, but it's seriously. It's wild. So yeah, that's when he does the stakeout. And that's when Moeka comes. Now, again, I do appreciate that Moeka is, in this moment when Moeka hands him the the food and stuff, and they do the stakeout. It felt very much like an Amane and Kurisu moment from back in like episode 14 or 15, which seems like every time we think back to like 5 episodes ago, it feels like an eternity. Feels like a world line ago, right? Because it is. But it's such a good kind of callback to that moment because Amane was having her prejudice about Kurisu being, you know, evil with CERN in the future. It was preventing her from connecting to Kurisu and getting to know her, which inadvertently impacted the past, present, and future. And so here we're kind of seeing the same thing with Moeka, where, you know, this Moeka hasn't killed Mayuri yet. So for all intents and purposes, Okarin can still be friends with her. It's fine, and would actually probably help in the long run if he did. And it does help in the long run. It gets her to cooperate with him more. So lessons are learned in Steins Gate. But yeah, so the whole thing with this has been that the more that Kurisu and Okarin interact to try to change the time, the further away him and Mayuri get. The further they get. And I don't see that getting better. I'm worried about that. I really am. I don't know how it's going to get better. But we as the audience have been noticing that with Mayuri and Okarin the last several episodes, that the deeper and deeper he gets entrenched into making the divergence, like the less they are apart. What if, worst case scenario, what if he changes and goes to this other world line, the beta world line, and Mayuri doesn't know him? And then he's like, what? And then he doesn't have Kurisu and Mayuri doesn't know him? That would be a bad ending. That would not be a fun ending, but it could happen. Could happen. I don't know. I don't know. We'll just see. But yeah, so then there's old Nai. Like, Nai and Mayuri are friends. I had this crazy thought during the episode, and I don't think this is true. But I'm like, based on the timeline, there's no way that Nai is actually Daru's granddaughter. Right? There's no way. I thought episodes ago that Nai ends up being Amane's mom in the future. I thought about that, which would have been crazy knowing that her dad is kind of like one of the main head dogs of CERN, and then she gives birth to Amane, who's one of the head of the resistance of CERN. Like that's some crazy Skywalker stuff going on right there. But then I thought, what if the reason Braun gets so mad about them bringing up Amane being like, well, how do you know her? What if Braun got with Amane while she wasn't remembering where she came from, and then they had Nai, and then she died of the illness in this world line, and she's Nai's mom? Like, what if that ends up being a thing? Although I don't think that that's true, because in the world line where where Amane harms herself, in that world line, you would think that Braun would have said something like, why would she leave her daughter all alone, So I don't think that's the case. I don't think Amane is Nai's mother, but I do kind of think that Nai is Amane's mother. I still kind of think that. The irony would be there, especially considering they both are on opposites ends of the spectrum here. I think that would be... And plus the fact that Braun had the access to the IBM 5100 under Amane's nose the entire time. But not the entire time, because honestly, that's what's so crazy about all the world lines, is it gets kind of hard to keep track, because every world line, whenever a D-mail would warp how the world line went, it's like, do we think that Braun sent Moeka to kill Mayuri, who's been basically babysitting his daughter? Well, no. But do we think the FB said, go procure the time machine and the IBM 5100 for CERN, eliminate anyone that is not useful? Because Braun kind of makes that statement in this episode. So she could have taken those orders and applied them to Mayuri and the others without Braun even realizing who she was applying them to. Because he wasn't home when she did the raid. So Braun wasn't around to see her come in and do the raid. So he didn't realize it was at his place and it was with Okarin and the others. He didn't know. So it's just all this game of little would-be, could-be encounters that end up not happening. And it's crazy. It's crazy, y'all. So yeah, the do-do-do. There were a couple things that happened in this episode that we haven't seen in a while. Daru being the super hacker, the do-do-do. Like, lots of things. I was like, these things all coming back. Like, it feels like we're coming back to the beginning. Also, speaking of Attack on Titan, Nai's little purse looks like a Titan. I'm just saying. That's all I'll say. But wild. Yeah. I talked about last episode how I was trying to think of who FB could be, and I was like, maybe it's Braun, but what would the F stand for? Like, B could stand for Braun, and we have the CRT with the technology and everything, because Amane picked up on that instantly, which, Amane picking up on that instantly, I'm sorry, Nai and Braun look just like Amane, so if they're not related, I don't know. But I couldn't figure out what the F was, and then when they said Ferdinand Braun, who created the CRT, I'm like, which honestly, I think looking back now, someone commented on that back at the very beginning, and I just didn't put two and two together. So that's on me, but I'm glad we finally got confirmation of who Braun is. But yeah, Braun having all of this against Okarin is like so wild now. It's crazy. She's like, the sale's about to end. We have to hurry, Dad. He's like, Yeah, so they end up going. And then meanwhile, at the stakeout, I like, again, we've had this symbolism throughout the series whenever a character, like it's been Okarin and Kurisu, it's been Okarin and Faris, it's been Okarin and Amane, where they've been standing side by side and there's like a tree or a building or a pole or something is separating them to keep them from, metaphorically, there's a metaphorical separation between them. And this episode is no different, right? So yeah. Okarin gets the text messages from FB, from Moeka's phone, said M4. The M4 is crazy, because was Moeka not lab member number 4? Was she not? And then this was from July 29th, saying you made the right decision. To be honest, no one has worked as hard or intently as you, M4. I mean, yeah, and the fact that Braun was just recruiting people to, like, that also gives, like, another, like, layer to part-time warrior, being like, was Amane going to be recruited as well? That's insane, right? That's crazy. I don't know. And maybe Braun knew that Okarin and them were going to be targeted, and he was just trying to, like, distance himself from him because he didn't want to get attached. I don't know. The whole thing of going in and out, the fact that Okarin did the time leap going back to go find them, so that was another world line spent. And the point of whenever we go back and see all the portraits and pictures of everybody going through the world line over and over again, I'm like, were those all time leaps too, sir? What are we doing? What are we doing? But yeah, but they finally are able to track it, and they're worried about who FB is. And then they go back, and they manage to wait to see what's happening to the computer, and we see Braun giving it to him, and they go away. They go to the airport, and they see it flying to France, where CERN is. So that's when Curry's like, you could call and tell me. Mayuri's worried sick that you're not hanging out with her. What are we doing? And Curry, and I like the Okarin's like, yeah, my bad. Also, this place where, oh my God, okay, at the very beginning, where, okay, this shot where, I swear this has already happened. The shot where Moeka is standing with her back facing us, the audience, against there. You all will have to check for me, but there was a shot early on in like early on in the series, like maybe one of the first episodes we really get to know Amane. But I think it's when Amane is telling Okarin and Kurisu about the world line shifting and the 1%. I feel like I would have to go back and look through every episode now, but there is a shot of Moeka standing right there, I'm pretty sure by herself, looking off the ledge, like it's from a different world line, but Okarin and Kurisu aren't there. I swear this has already happened. I'm not going crazy. I need to drink more Dr. Pepper to help. What? If I watch Steins Gate 0, will you all judge me if I get like the big K Dr. Thunder. If I just get the off-brand, if I watch Steins Zero, can I get the off-brand of Dr. Pepper, or I just have like the Clover Valley version, or just like a different version of Dr. K, like every time? That's what I'm gonna do. After we're done with the OG Steins Gate, every movie, OVA, or Steins Gate Zero will have a different version of this. It won't go back to being Dr. Pepper. It'll be an off-brand, like some kind of off-brand it will be. Like Dr. K, and then like Dr. Thunder or something. Like, it's got to be an off-brand. There's a bunch of little side brands. We got to go with that. Ha! So yeah, there is one moment where Kurisu gets a little bit jealous of Moeka, where she's like, Mayuri's kind of worried. And I don't think it's actually jealousy in that moment. I genuinely think that Kurisu looks over and sees Moeka and is like, the fact that she's looking at Mayuri's future killer is what makes her remember Mayuri. And I'm glad that Okarin does say he's sorry, but like, my dude, your actions speak louder than words. Yeah, that shot there. Okay, that shot there where Moeka is looking off of by the terminal and stuff, where she's looking out the rails. That's in a previous episode, but Kurisu and Okarin aren't there. That's already happened. It's gonna drive me crazy. But yeah, I may go look in a minute and see what it is. Hold on. Well, I couldn't find it anywhere, so one thing I did notice, I went back and looked at a couple episodes like from the beginning. In the episode, so Moeka was lab member number 5. M4 is lab member number 5. But what I also found out was, in the original world line, at the end of episode, I don't know if it was 4 or 5, one of those original episodes, Okarin confronts Moeka, and Moeka's like, "Are you FB?" And Okarin's like, "Well, you figured it out, so might as well go along." She thought that Okarin was FB. So up until the world lines changed, the harem plot was still on. That's because it was. She thought he was FB, and then once they sent that D-mail and it altered everything, then she no longer thought that, and so she wasn't calling him like, I don't think she called him Master. I think that was Ferris, but she wasn't as lovey-dovey in the text anymore because she wasn't clingy to him. Because her personality is just the type that's like that, and FB preyed on that. And Okarin was originally doing that until the world line changed. So I also went back and looked at some of those. I took a little break before I came back to this part of the discussion and went back. But there's so many moments leading up to now of Okarin and Kurisu building this friendship with one another, even though Kurisu tragically can't remember half of it, which is very frustrating. But Okarin remembers it, and it's kind of heartbreaking. I don't envy this man with the task ahead of him at all. He's like, so yeah. So then we have the room with Nai in it and all her stuff there, and just him going out and then letting them all in. But he did he not know who I guess he had to have known who Moeka was, right? Even though he'd never seen her before, he had to have known. Also, I like her teacup is like the tiny little teacup that's beside them. It's like not on the table. She has it there. She must have put it on the table, though, because when Nai comes back. But then they have the stuff, the shrine and stuff for Amane, which just makes all of this even more crazy that he was working for CERN and that Amane inadvertently let in the guy and helped. That's the crazy part, is that we talked about Amane helping out and working with Kurisu, even though she knows Kurisu is going to become really involved with CERN in the future, or in her world line was. She let Braun stay at her house, which inadvertently got him off the streets, even though at the time he was working for CERN, and she had no idea, even though she was like part of the resistance in the future against CERN. That's crazy and absolutely insane. So I'm not mad at the fact that Braun is FB. It kind of makes a little bit of sense. I get it, the whole stuff about Ferdinand Braun, and then he was like, Moeka, you're the traitor. That part I have no problems with. That was a good reveal. I like the stuff with Ferdinand Braun that he talks about, being like, what were his initials? And they're like, oh yeah, shit, FB. Also, the use of initials is also something that seems tied to Amane, and the pin with the initials on it. So I'm like, is that revealing that Nye was going to be, is Nye Amane's mom? I don't know. I'm kind of glad Daru is not involved in this plot line. I've been kind of sad that Daru has taken a back seat to a lot of the plot lines ever since Amane's storyline ended. Daru kind of like was picked up and put over in a corner, and it's like, you know, normally I'd be like, don't put Daru in a corner. But if it's true that Nye ends up being his future, like, spouse and daughter of his child, I kind of am glad that he was not around for this subplot, because Daru's been through enough. We don't need to involve him in that, right? Especially if the world lines, you know, altering and changing, if you start to remember what was lost in that world line. I mean, Daru was told at the end of this that Amane was his daughter. Is he going to remember about her death and everything? Or will Okarin be like, well, her death is different than how it was the first time you found out, because the world lines have changed. So, you know, there's just a lot. Yeah. So then my thing is, they go to this abandoned, like, this was the part of the episode that I was like, but wait, because the setup, if you go to 14 minutes into this episode, the setup, they're at this abandoned, like, dirt lot, which is about where I think Okarin confronted Moeka earlier on in the world lines, whenever he first confronted her and had the pretend gun and everything, then took her gun. But if you look at this setup, there's like trees and buildings where everybody can see you, and there's people walking on the street like 100 feet from you, and there are cars and everything. If this is the spot where they end up where he shoots Moeka and then himself, problem number one, worst place to do that. There's so many things people could see you do, and like, what? The location is crazy. The location is crazy. And then, yeah, there, I guess, okay. Oh, okay. Never mind. I'm going to put my foot in my mouth and then slowly take it out. This is the picture of what what it is looking like, but there are concrete walls surrounding all ends. But still, there are buildings all around it. So somebody out that window of that building could see this guy shooting a woman and then himself. Like, they could have gotten images of that. They could have. And they're like, are you really FBI? I mean, I guess they had to go somewhere different, but this still, I mean, it is kind of isolated, but not crazy isolated. Also, if you knew the guy that was responsible, this is where I kind of am like, there are a few little kind of elements here that they're not necessarily plot holes, but they're just me as a writer going, but how'd we get here? And why did we make this decision? So, because if you're Okarin and Kurisu, and he's like, here, let me, the guy who orchestrated manipulating this woman to kill your best friend, let's go to this abandoned lot. You've never seen a gangster movie before in this world line. Let's just go here into this secluded area with high walls where nobody can see us. And I'm an untrusting individual. Let me take you to this secluded location where we can hash it out. Why couldn't we hash? I would have been like, no, we're going to stay right here where your daughter is, and we're going to hash it out right here in front of her, because you clearly aren't going to do anything crazy in front of your kid. He didn't bring out the gun until the moment he shot her. So Okarin and Kurisu didn't know he had it. So I'm like, I would have stayed in that damn house. I would have stayed in that damn house. I wouldn't have gone out to this area. But yeah. So then he like talks about how he basically ended up working for CERN, which was basically just, it's the stereotypical like mob story of how do you end up in the mob? Well, you're destitute in this horrible position, and they dangle a thread and you just climb on up it, and you're just kind of a victim of circumstance, which is, you know, I'm not mad at that. That all makes sense. It's fascinating with how he ends up being helped by like one of the main people in the resistance against CERN. That's some crazy irony. Like, that part's all, I don't mind that. I don't mind that. I think that's all interesting, right? That part's okay. The thing that gets me is when he decides that, when he talks about how Moeka's not useful to him anymore, just like how she treated Mayuri, and then he shoots her. That part was crazy, and now Okarin has to witness that. But then, with the gun, the part that got me out of all of this, not that they followed this untrusting man to a secluded location, which I was like, Okarin, you've been through how many world lines? You've been through how many of these scenarios? I know you've crashed out, sir, and your brain's a little fried, but what made you think this was going to go well at any given point? I don't think any of it did. But unless he threatened them with the gun, but they didn't know about the gun until he got there, so that wasn't the case. The thing that got me was him shooting himself. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, but Romania, CERN knew about him. So if they found out that he shot Moeka and that she was a traitor, then they know that he's a traitor because he's told Okarin and Kurisu about it. So he had to shoot himself. But I'm like, he could have bought some time. Instead, he's like, oh yeah, my daughter. I mean, he shoots himself because he's like, I don't want my daughter to get involved. And if she doesn't know about any of this and I just kill myself now, then she won't get involved. But I'm like, why didn't he just shoot Okarin and Kurisu? That's why I was so worried. I kept thinking, I'm like, oh God, he's got a gun. If he's got extra bullets, any logical person in that scenario, if you're evil, is going to be like, oh, you're two that CERN's going to find out about. Boink, boink, bye. I mean, if you were in that situation, but instead he's like, you owe me $6,000. You owe me $6,000 in rent, but it's okay. Boop. What? Shouldn't overreact about that. But I'm like, this guy owes you rent, and also taking him and this girl out would solve all your problems with CERN. But nope, you're just gonna get rid of yourself. Okay. These are choices. I guess it says a lot for his character that he doesn't take out Okarin and Kurisu, but I feel like it was the writing in Steins Gate has been so solid, even if it's been outdated. Like we talked about episode 18 with Ruka. Even when it's been outdated and maybe needed some inclusivity writers, it still has been really good and for what it is. But this is the one scene of Steins Gate that I went, wait. The one scene I was like, why'd he kill himself? I mean, I get why. It just maybe wasn't my favorite choice. And plus you left your daughter alone. You just talked about her not being involved. So I'm like, did you just be like, well, I don't want CERN to kill me, but you guys are good with taking care of a kid, right? Joink. What? I mean, okay. And here's the other thing that kind of backs up my idea that Nye is Amane's mother. Two things. One, we find out Ferdinand Braun is a pseudonym, so we don't know his actual name. And we know that Amane got her name, Suzaha Amane, got her name from her mom's side. So if his last name is Amane, boom, problem solved. And the fact that he conveniently has had like a pseudonym this whole time. But also, he's like, I have somebody to like care for. I don't want my daughter to get caught up with CERN and get killed. She's innocent and doesn't know anything. She can't die. Because you're basically setting up world line nodes of people are going to die. Amane is going to die at this time. Moeka is possible. I mean, Curry's. Is this 4 days later? Is this a few days later? Is this the 15th? Did Moeka die anyway, only by his hands instead of her own? Maybe, possibly, could have been. We need to double check. Maybe. Maybe it's been that long. I think it was the 13th when that happened, but still, anyway. But yeah, but the point being, he ends up killing himself, I guess because in this, we see her waiting on her dad to come back, and she's like made breakfast for both of them, which is the saddest freaking thing ever. But I'm like, we can't kill Nye, because if she's actually Amane's mom, then there's a chance that we don't want to create a node where she dies, because then Amane won't exist. And we can't do that, so this is what we get instead. Interesting. I honestly, when he bent down and she said, I'm sorry, I thought that she was going to tell him something from the text message, but no, that's not what ends up happening. So yeah, they're like, well, are we going back? I guess so. And then we find the whole M4. Yep. What was the text message that they sent that they were trying to undo there? In search of IBN. Search off. Stand by. Do nothing. Okay. So then they changed the text message and we get to 57. We didn't jump that much. We only went from like 52 to 57. But then he goes back to the very, very, very beginning where she's sitting there with the phone. And then the text message that he gets says, I won't need the IBN 5100 for a while now. From Shining Finger. Mm-hmm. Yep. And she still has the new phone, which is interesting. She just doesn't need it anymore. So then they get the IBN 5100. And Daru is back in the plot line. So I'm glad Okarin had like this moment of relief where he's like, Daru went to Komima with Mayuri, remember? And so we go back to the 13th. Mm-hmm. So wait, did he do a time leap again? Surely not. Surely we didn't do another time leap. But I think we did. Maybe. But yeah, he's like, hear my request. And so Daru starts to hack into CERN. And then she's like, okay, the only way to prevent Mayuri's death is to leave this alpha world line to go and return to the world line that exists before you sent your first email, which is the beta one. I don't know. There's just something about how it seems all too simple to go back to the beginning. There's just something about it. After everything we've been through, after all the craziness that has unfolded, it seems like it's too simple. And maybe that's the whole, like, Kurisu has to die for it to happen. It seems too simple. Mm-hmm. I do like that we brought back the Dr. Peppers for this episode. And he's like, and the only way to do that is to delete the data from CERN's database. He's like, all this stuff about Mayushi dying. So he told Daru about Mayushi dying and Amane being the future daughter. He's like, if this is all in your head, you could totally be a light novel author. If this comes back to some Bilbo Baggins shit and Okarin ends up writing Steins Gate as a light novel series and it all comes full circle and is meta, I will chug a Dr. Pepper. He's like, nothing could make me happier. Well, maybe that's the happy world line, that Okarin becomes a novelist instead of a mad scientist. Who knows? And she's like, well, as a hypothesis, I believe it, but we need some objective data. But that's obviously impossible. And he's like, the time leap machine you built worked perfectly. And she's like, oh, really? And then she's like, well, of course it did. And he says, not to mention. And honestly, this is like the most it's almost an intimate moment between him and Kurisu, which is like, Okarin is never romantic. So this is like the one time he is. And you're like, oh, look at you, Okarin. And then he's like, never mind. And then he's like, I said, never mind. Daru's like, we got all hooked up. I've got to config some stuff, but we're good to go in 10 minutes. And he's like, I'm counting on you, super hacker. And he's like, uh-huh. And she's like, the first D-mail, huh? And she's like, well, that's the one where you said I got stabbed or whatever, wasn't it? And then he stops drinking. I'm like, how'd you forget that, Okarin? That's Ben. She's like, I bet you tried to feel me up, huh? Well, I don't think he kind of did the first time after the D-mail, he did. And that was a horrible mistake and was really uncomfortable to watch. But no. And I'm like, Okarin, did you just now realize that she's going to have to die for you to save Mayuri? You just now realize this, sir? You've been so caught up in saving Mayuri that that's just eluded you, sir? If she knew that this time leap stuff was going on, girl, I wouldn't joke about that because you know it's true. I'd be like, wait a minute. And here's the thing. Okarin is too nice. Is Okarin going to bring it up to her? I bet he does. I mean, he has to, right? But yeah, to save Mayuri, Kurisu has to die. I wanted to bring up Neon Genesis for a hot second. So I guess Neon Genesis spoilers for like the next 30 seconds. But the whole conversation about Okarin and then choosing between Kurisu and Mayuri gives off Rei vibes from Neon Genesis, and Kurisu gives off Asuka vibes from Neon Genesis. And then there's Shinji. So you have Shinji who relates Rei to family because she kind of is. And then you have Shinji and Kurisu, Shinji and Asuka, which could be a ship. It feels like this is the recreation of the Neon Genesis ship, just with time travel and these characters. But yeah, so end of Neon Genesis spoilers. We all can hash that out in the comments down below. But yeah, so that's a wild time. That's fun. So yeah, this episode was such a strange, after having the absolute crash out darkness that was last episode that was really hard to watch. This one was a weird mixed bag. It was like, on the one hand, the interactions between Okarin and Moeka were so much better, and I was like, oh, thank God. On the other hand, we had that bizarre slaughter of Moeka and Braun that I was like, but why? And now we're back to Braun is alive. No worries there. But now Okarin knows that he works for CERN. Also, Braun working for CERN, I'm like, the fact that CERN was hacking into their computer, I'm like, do you not think Braun would maybe know because of your TV in his shop being the conductor for the D-mail or time leap machine? We think that that's relevant, maybe, possibly. I don't know. Anyway, I'm super excited to know your thoughts down below, that's for sure. And I can't believe we only have 21, 22, 23, 24. We have 5 episodes left. What the fudge? So, yeah. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this reaction and my rambles. I hope you are enjoying Whiteboard Coon's new marker friends that he is in a polyamorous relationship with. And I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back real soon with more of Steins Gate. And I'll see you then. Bye.